My name is Nick Andrade, and I am obsessed with motorsports. So obsessed, I quit my engineering job to start a car company. On this channel, we talk about the influential cars, people, and stories that have shaped the automotive world. You'll also see the hurdles of building this company, a deep dive into the engineering behind the cars, and the first look at my always impressive designs. Our journey is fully unknown. It will be both glorious and messy. My dream is to build open source performance vehicles that regular people can afford. This is AM2. I started by printing out several cars that have unique design characteristics. I then promptly ignored the design characteristics of all the unique cars and drew an LMP1 car with very generalized aero locations and features like swan neck, wing support, and some NACA ducts. Nothing real special. Really what I was doing with drawing this car is getting the general location of where I think things are going to end up being, like the brake cooling ducts, any cooling for the radiator. I have an idea at this point of where the suspension is going to end up, the engine, the transaxle, and I can kind of do guesswork at this point for the first time outside of CAD where things will end up. Okay, so we're going to pause for a second and take a look at the streamlines that I've drawn over the car. This really illustrates what I was just talking about, where I expect the airflow to go. You'll see I have some slots over the wheels and some streamlines coming out of the back of the front wheels to show that I'm bleeding pressure off the front wheels so we don't get lift at high speed. You'll also see that I have rear brake cooling ducts as well as front brake cooling ducts. The rears are NACA ducts, the fronts are just circles like on the Riley MK3. The NACA ducts are really similar to most LMP1 or even just general sports cars. And I do have a single swan neck wing. I don't know if the car will have a wing at this point. I think that I'm trying to design the car to go under 150 miles an hour, which is, if you're going faster than 150 miles an hour at a track day or high performance driving event, you are flying. Without getting into some heavy downforce and some slick tires and some really, really thought out aero, I want the car to stay under 150 miles an hour. So that's our target. So as I move forward, before I even start clay modeling, I'm going to cut this foam core. And the foam core is just so I don't have to use a bunch of clay. I figured it would also add some rigidity, so as I press on it with my hands, I'm not distorting each side. I ended up getting a little bit too detailed with the foam model. As you'll see, I end up carving it. And really, it was just a huge waste of time making all these details on the foam, because you end up taking the clay and just squishing it on there, and it becomes this big, thick thing you have to remove all over again anyways. So don't bother, use a small shape, and then make sure to use a generous amount of clay around all of the surfaces. So the first thing I do is accidentally apply the clay to the test foam model I cut, and I have to transfer it over, but it's no big deal because it was just one big glob. You'll see me using a mix of craft tools I bought and my hands. I liked using the craft tool more for some of the fine details and cutting and removing of clay. But for the most part, I actually did a lot of the styling with my hands, and you'll see me smoothing out the car with my hands just because it was small enough and malleable enough that pressing on it with my hands was a lot more organic for me. Pay attention to how I use the clay that I take off the model or cut and remove. It ends up going back on in a different spot because the whole thing will be asymmetric and you need to kind of even it out as you go. So I let the clay cure for a day just because I wanted to have a nice desk ornament from the first clay model I ever sculpted. And the whole thing ended up kind of cracking because, again, it's natural clay instead of modeling clay. For the next clay model that I do, I'm going to go and pick up a bunch of modeling clay, because if I wanted to make any changes or edits to this car today, like, for example, the front and rear bumper, I think the rear bumper looks too much like a Corvette, and I think the front looks too much like a Lotus Exige. So if I wanted to make any changes to this today, it's just impossible. I do see why, after doing this, why they've been doing it for over 100 years. And it's because if you're a terrible drawer like I am, it is really helpful to be able to mold and push the material where you see it in your head without having to go erase your drawing and try and get it in 3D. You have the 3D thing in front of you, and it's so organic to be able to make the shape you want. And believe it or not, the human mind is very good at proportioning things. So oftentimes when I do a sketch on paper or some kind of scale model like this, it ends up being very close as to where the engine and the transaxle and the suspension and the tires and the doors need to be. So it's a very good way to just kind of see things and flesh out those initial ideas before you really take time to put it into CAD, because it is more of math than art once you've gotten into CAD. Thank you for watching this video. It was my first, but I promise to be adding more as I progress through the designs. I'll be going to a NASCAR race next week, so stay tuned for my analysis on some NASCAR stuff. And I should be hitting some track days and posting some more design stuff coming up every week. Thanks.